Teachers of Reddit, what's your most NSFW story from your workplace? A professor of mine recently told me a story about a student of his who gave him a flash drive to hand in an assignment. When the prof plugged the flash drive in and opened the folder the student told him to open, he came across pages and pages of hardcore adult content. He, politely as possible, was like, "Are you sure it's in this folder?" To which the student, who was not looking at the screen, was like, "Yeah, it's in there, keep looking." After scrolling some more, my prof called the student over to the computer and was like, pretty sure it's not in here. Of course, the student was beyond embarrassed. We'll definitely never forget that one. P.S. Imagine if the assignment was in the folder, though. Like, the student came over to the screen and saw all of the adult content and was like, oh yeah, just scroll down a bit more. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. My mother taught elementary school for 35 years. Second grader told his teacher he was going to shoot her. Teacher blows it off. Next morning, my mom waits for the kid to get off the bus. Follows him to class and grabs his backpack when he put it up. Yup, loaded revolver. No news, nothing. Cops came, but the principal kept it relatively quiet. This was Houston, mid to late 80s. At the time of this next story, my wife had been teaching for about 15 years. 8th grader in foster care sat in the front left desk, draped his jacket on his right side, proceeded to whip out his junk and go to Cranktown during class. Wife noticed, called for help without the rest of the class even knowing. Kid didn't get the satisfaction of her looking scared, etc., and hopefully the kid got help. Brother taught at a last chance high school while he was coaching football at another high school. 17-year-old girl walks up calmly after class and says, "Coach, I want to suck your dong." Brother was mid-20s at the time. Said half a second flashed by, and then he said, No, come with me. Walked her down to the office, sure he's about to get arrested because she will twist the story around. Thankfully she didn't. Brother quit soon after. Not worth the risk for a young guy. Story 3. I will take this a different direction. My first week of teaching had its ups and downs. I was teaching a PE class and had a new kindergarten class for the first time. A few minutes into class, a little 5-year-old boy raises his hand. "Mr. Teacher, I have a problem. My PP is really hard right now and I don't know what to do." Holding in every ounce of laughter I had, I told him I was sorry and we would talk about his problem in a few minutes. Not long after, he raises his hand again. "Yes, Caleb?" "Don't worry, it's not a problem anymore," he tells me with the biggest smile on his face. Gotta love teaching elementary. Story 4. Not me, but the woman who taught across the hall from me. She was teaching a 9th grade math class, and her classroom had those old-fashioned pencil sharpeners that attach to the wall, and you turn the lever to sharpen your pencil. One of her students was sharpening her pencil every day during class and seemed to take a long time to do so, because each time she would stand at the back of class sharpening her pencil for 2 or so minutes. After a week or so of this, the teacher went to ask the student if they needed any help. Turns out the girl was putting her kitty up against the pencil sharpener and was using the vibrations to get off in the middle of math class. If you were telling me a guy was using a pencil sharpener to get off, I would have a much different image. This one I'm kinda just confused. Story 5. I've told this story several times, but here goes. I was an occasional substitute teacher in the town where I went to college. The band director often requested me to come teach if she was out sick, since I was a music major and could work with the kids on their parts. Get in for a day and my instructions were to break up the kids by section and have them practice their parts. I spent the next hour listening to a miasma of sounds, from woodwinds, brass strings, etc., but no drumming. If you don't know any drummers, they are always playing or banging on their laps, tables, steering wheels, etc. Curious me goes to investigate the drum room, and I walked in on the token female drummer, flashing her breasts to the boys in exchange for money. OP, you left out some crucial information in that, which grade is this? Story 6. I was a teacher from 2010 to 2015. I was teaching high school at an all-girls school, and there was this student teacher from a local university. He was 19 or 20. He was always being a jerk to this one senior at the school. I thought it a bit odd that he was always focusing on her. Fast forward a few months and it was post-graduation. I was out at a local bar and look over and see them together there. A coworker said they'd been screwing for the past few months. I asked him how he knew. There was a smaller teacher's lounge in one of the wings of the school. As there weren't normal classes in that wing, it was not frequented, and the setup wasn't as nice. He said he popped in there one day and she was down on her knees blowing him. He closed the door and walked away. Not long after, the student teacher found him in his class and asked him what he saw. My coworker was a bit stunned and said he wasn't sure. The student teacher said that he should keep what he saw to himself or the truth could get twisted against him. He implied the senior would state that she was going down on my coworker and not the student teacher. There were no cameras or anything in that area, so my coworker decided to keep his mouth shut. Story 7. Subbed at a school years ago. A teacher broke up with a student he had been banging. She got upset with him and told people they'd been banging. Then another girl revealed that she had also been banging with him too. Then a girl who'd graduated the year before said that they'd been together as well. And then another from even earlier. It turns out this teacher, who was a coach for one of the girls' sports teams, had been using that team as his own personal harem for over a decade, finding, grooming, and seducing at least a dozen high school girls. The school district paid an unspecified amount of money to a lot of people to have him quietly resign and leave town. Surely the risk can't be worth the reward, right? Like, okay, it's hard to get in the mindset of someone like this because there is no reward in my mind, but sure. But the risk, you lose everything. You lose literally everything. It's a felony. You can't do this. You get put on the offender list for I don't know how many years, a bunch, and there's no way you can work in at least the education field for a while. So the fact that he only silently resigned is absurd. He got away very lucky. Story 8. I was actually a teacher, middle school, 6th to 8th grade. Caught 2 students banging, 7th grade. Parents were called in. Parents of the boy yell at him, ground him, and do parental things. Girls' parents go on about how their precious little snowflake wouldn't do such a thing. She was a good Christian girl. Baby born 9 months later. Another time, an 8th grader whips it out in class and goes to town. Bonus, principal's son. Nothing happened to him. Shocker. He kept doing it in various classes and moves on to high school. Tries to do it in high school, expelled. Because daddy could no longer pull the strings for him. The teacher for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes got caught having an affair with a fellow teacher by a student. They were going at it in his classroom. Both of them were the holier-than-thou types. Hilariously, they still tried to pull the old, Jesus forgives us of our sins and you're going to hell if you mention it again. They were fired. Kid got caught jerking it into the chili by the head lunch lady. School had to spend literally thousands of dollars to call in a massive pizza order because there wasn't enough time to make another lunch. Kid high AF on meth. Really crappy home life. He was expelled and put into one of those alternative schools. Really ticked off to this day that he wasn't given any actual help. Just passed off to someone else. I still think about him to this day, and I hope he's okay. And then, of course, there's the usual. Smoking weed in the bathroom, BJs in the band room, kids cursing out teachers, jerk parents, kids beating the holy crap out of each other, etc. I don't teach anymore. Story 9. Many years ago, when I first started teaching at theater school, I came into work hungover. It was not my intention to drink as much as I did the night before, nor did I think any repercussions from said drinking would last to my first class the following day. But that's the situation I found myself in when soldiering forth into work. I thought the hangover would eventually subside, but it stayed strong the whole day. I managed to function normally without anyone being the wiser, until it came down to my last duty of the day. We were auditioning students for a show. The nerves were high amongst the students, while I was using every fiber of my being to keep it together. It was probably the 5th or 6th student in the rotation that froze on stage, walked up to me from the stage area and said they weren't feeling well. I smiled and tried to calm the student down, but as I was explaining that everything was going to be okay, the student puked all over me. That's when my resolve went out the window and I puked all over the student. This triggered a few other students to vomit as well. Luckily, I wasn't the only teacher in the room and I was able to excuse myself to get towels for the mess. I successfully played the whole thing off as a sensitive stomach, and was kindly offered the rest of the day off. But that was the last time I did any drinking the night before class. Edit. Feel like I should clear a few things up. 1. The drinking in question was a much higher proof beer than I thought I was having, and I was drinking straight from a growler jug. 2. The smell was mainly stomach acid with a hint of ginger ale. The ginger ale that I was drinking to help calm my stomach. 3. Of all the scenes the comments are referencing, the Family Guy Ipecac scene is the closest resemblance. Well, that's disgusting. Yep, don't got much else to say. Story 10. Not actually NSFW, but potentially. I had just started teaching, 9th and 10th grade English. 14-year-old Andrea had a total crush on me from day one. She learned that I love, read, and write poetry, and she showed me some of her stuff, which was actually quite good. She would come to my room during lunch, during my planning period, and show me more and more. Being super uptight about being alone with a female student, we would go into the hallway or library. Her poems started getting more and more erotic, however, and eventually I had to tell her that, while the writing is very creative, the content is not at all appropriate to be showing your teacher. She eventually began to tone it down and started writing spiritual poetry that I can only describe as love poems to God. But the one that she had me read that was obviously about me and her in a wooded cabin, loving in every way possible, was the most uncomfortable experience in the world. Story 11. Student taught at a high school in a more rural area of Georgia. Had a freshman end up in a wheelchair for a while after trying to bang with a horse/donkey/mule whatever. He ended up in psychiatric care by the end of the year, because he was writing letters to some of the girls detailing horrific, intimate acts he wanted to do with/to them. At the second place I taught at, I asked the class if they had any questions after going over the requirements for an assignment. I had a girl raise her hand, and after I called her in, she proceeded to ask me if it was possible to fill a rubber with crap and then use it to go screw myself. She was immediately sent to the office and was removed from the classroom. Story 12. Two colleagues of mine, Frank and Sophie, were having an affair while both being married. They got caught in the shower at a weekend school trip where students and teachers spent the night at a facility. Cue the affair being out in the open. Frank is now sick, at home, trying to make amends with his wife, who's depressed and mentioned unaliving more than once. Sophie, who is a representative for the Christian Values Party here, by the way, got the boot from her husband and now has a thing. I kid you not, with Frank's best friend. Best part is, all the while, another colleague and one of my good friends, Bert, found out his wife, Leanne, was having an affair. Bert and Leanne are now separated as well. I tried to be as supportive as possible until the day Claire, another colleague, told me that while Bert was married to Leanne, he was also hooking up regularly with yet another colleague of mine, Zoe, Claire's best friend. I actually forgot about the fact that Claire broke off her marriage with her husband, Pete, to be with an ex-colleague of mine, Robert, who was dating another current colleague at another campus, Lois. Pete and Lois even managed to hook up for a while after that whole debacle, so yeah, go figure. You know that saying about truth being stranger than fiction? Well, yeah, our school's a mess right now. Basically, I'm just happy to eat the popcorn and not be the movie. I can just imagine a happily married couple where one of the spouses is a teacher and they're like, I'm gonna go teach at this school. And the other spouse has heard what's going on and they're like, no, you're not. That school does things to teachers. Story 13. I just begun class. Freshman comp at a community college, and was going over what the day's plan was. A student walked in a few minutes late, sat down, and pulled out his computer. Upon opening the computer, very loud moaning sounds of adult content emanated into the room for approximately 3 seconds. Once he got it to stop, he shakily said, I'm sorry. I stood at the podium and said, a couple of times, and then, just give me a minute, guys. I stood there looking down at the podium trying to collect my thoughts as calmly as humanly possible, so I could continue the class like nothing happened. After around 15 seconds of pure and uncomfortable silence, a kid from the back of the room let out a 2-syllable, guttural chuckle. I lowered my head to behind the podium with my hand still clasping onto it above my head as I bent over and lost my crap. I laughed hysterically and uncontrollably for at least 30 to 45 seconds, emulating Stewie's ridiculous laugh from that episode of Family Guy, but with far more wheezing and high-pitched squealing. The entire class started to laugh with me as soon as I started. After I was finally able to collect myself, I apologized to everyone and said that I was sorry, and that I tried so hard to remain composed. Later, when telling this story to other faculty, they agreed that there's no time in pedagogy classes devoted to the appropriate reaction to adult noises being played during class, and that I did the best with what I could by not calling the kid out. I literally didn't even make eye contact with him, since that was embarrassing enough as it was. Side note, the kid stayed for the entire class. I was impressed. That kid knows the value of a good education right there. He's there to learn, and by God, he'll learn. Embarrassing situations be damned. Story 14. Had an autistic kid in our class, 2 teachers, myself included, who wasn't potty trained, despite being in a class level where he probably should have been. He craps himself and the other teacher's like, go get him changed up and I'll keep the kids busy. I take him to the bathroom and go to grab his backup pants. The other teacher shrieks because one of the students is pelting toys at it's a girl. He craps himself. The other teacher is like, TNT, go get him changed and I'll keep the kids busy. I take him to the bathroom and go to grab his backup pants. The other teacher shrieks because one of the other students is pelting toys at her. I go to take care of that mess. Takes me all of 30 seconds. I come back to Autistic Boy and he has stripped himself and smeared his crap all over the walls, toilet, sink himself. It's just a crap tornado. I almost quit that day. Story 15. I'm not a teacher, but my aunt is. She has spent her career working with EC kids. Apparently, jerking it frequently anywhere, anytime is a thing with these kids, particularly the ones with Downs. She has many stories of kids just suddenly starting to beat it in class. She used to talk about this one particular girl that had DS and was constantly pleasuring herself. They did have a punishment routine for these kids as they are not dumb and knew right from wrong, but it didn't seem to work with her. She took this kid and others to the Special Olympics in China a few years ago, and had to have a chaperone assigned specifically to her to keep her from doing it in public. She still managed to rub one out here and there from what my aunt said. EC teachers, I salute you. Story 16. I teach 9th to 12th grade maths, and oh boy. In one of my previous schools around 5 years ago or so, a coworker walked into the lounge pretty early in the morning, like an hour before school officially starts, to find 2 other coworkers screwing like rabbits near the desks. He told us he took one look, went to his desk, left his stuff, and went out to grab coffee. Don't think I saw him the year after. In a school I worked at, there was a huge backyard that was basically like a forest. It went upwards until you reached the fence. In 3 years, I saw 4 pairs diddling each other during class hours, and once I was with a coworker and we busted a lone student jacking the jackhammer behind a tree. I don't think I've laughed that much in my life when I went back home. In my country, every month, the schools spend one day doing basically nothing. It's called stroll. The students can't leave school premises, but they can do whatever they want inside. I was with a couple of coworkers roaming the yard, when someone starts shouting, "Mouse! Mouse!" and everyone loses their crap over a mouse that's cowered in the corner of the wall. We're chuckling and we approach, intending to help the poor thing escape, when the janitor runs up to us with a broomstick. In an instant, he squeezes the mouse into the corner with the broomstick. The frickin' sound that came out of the mouse as the guy squeezed it to death still makes me tear up. Every student started shouting and looking away. I honestly let out a half scream, and one of my coworkers pulled the janitor away. It wasn't even a large mouse, not even a rat, just smaller than a palm. It got demolished. We picked it up with some paper towels and one coworker took it. No idea what happened to its body. Story 17. My mom is a preschool teacher, and here's the best story I heard so far. There was this kid who bit everything. He chewed on toys, walls, teachers, and of course, other preschoolers. So one time, a kid comes out of the bathroom that is in one corner of the class and his pants are down. And of course, his willy is hanging. The second my mom notices, the biting kid does too. But he's in the opposite corner of the class. He starts sprinting towards the boy, and my mom does the same. But she, being in her 50s, is slower, but closer than the naked kid. She gets there just barely in time to grab the kid who's just standing there and takes him off of the trajectory of the biting kid, as the biting kid is charging with his mouth open like a torpedo. If she didn't get there faster, the kid probably would have been scarred for life. That living torpedo is probably around 10 right now, and I heard he's normal now. Story 18. This kinda isn't my story, but it's still good in NSFW. One time, a kid was doing his visiting days at the school. We were a private school with a bit of a history for admitting misfits, and during art class was seen by another kid jerking it under the table to completion, then wiping his nut on his t-shirt. When the head of the middle school told his mom about it afterwards, she said, "Oh yeah, that's something he does when he's nervous." Needless to say, it was a hard pass from the admissions. Story 19. I have too many. The one that sticks out the most is the time my teaching partner and I were working after school. He went down the hall to use the bathroom and saw a line of high school boys coming out from the girls' bathroom. He taps one on the shoulder and asks, "What's going on in there?" Lo and behold, an honor student was in the girls' handicapped stall, letting the girls' basketball team run train on her to get them pumped up for the state playoffs. Of course, she was expelled, but was allowed to walk for graduation in May. Some people let their freak flags fly. This chick was 6 freak flags over Texas.